It arrived in a plain manila envelope, unmarked except for my name, handwritten in blocky, unfamiliar letters. No return address. No sender. Just my name, Elena, scrawled across the front like it was meant to haunt me. Inside, a single USB stick. Black, unassuming, and ice cold from the early morning frost it must have sat in. There was no note, no context. Just the eerie weight of something I didn't ask for but somehow already feared. I should have hesitated. I should have asked Mark, my husband, if he was expecting a delivery. But I didn't. I walked straight to my home office, closed the door quietly behind me, and slid the USB into the port of my laptop. At first, it looked like nothing, just a folder titled Contingency. My stomach clenched. That word alone sent a chill up my spine. Contingency for what? I double-clicked it. There were subfolders, meticulously arranged and labeled. Accounts, messages, video logs, legal drafts. She'll never know. That last one felt like a slap. I hovered my mouse over it, heart thudding against my ribs like it wanted to escape. I clicked. And that's when I saw him, Mark, on a grainy video, sitting in a room I didn't recognize, talking to someone off camera. His tone was casual. Too casual. He was saying things like, "She's useful for now," and "Everything's in her name anyway, I'm clean." I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Every syllable was like acid pouring into my ears. Then came another voice, a woman's voice, soft, sultry, laughing as she said, "Does she suspect anything?" And Mark answered without even blinking, "Elena, never." I didn't finish the video. I closed the lid of the laptop, as if that would silence what I just heard. But it was already echoing inside me, too loud to ignore. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From something deeper. A rupture forming beneath everything I thought I knew. That folder wasn't meant for me. I wasn't supposed to know. But someone wanted me to. And in the bottom corner of the screen, in the metadata of the file, there was a name. Just one letter. J. It was the name of the man who stood beside me on our wedding day. The best man. His best friend. And now, maybe, the one person who had just shattered everything. It's strange how quickly we rewrite the past when we're wounded. I've replayed our story in my head countless times since that day, trying to see the cracks I missed, the shadows I ignored. But the truth is, for a long time, my marriage looked perfect. Mark was the kind of man who filled a room. Tall, articulate, the kind of laugh that made people want to lean in closer. We met at a friend's engagement party, and within a year, we were inseparable. He was a financial advisor, ambitious but grounded, or so I thought. I worked as a compliance analyst for a mid-size firm. We joked that together, we could keep the world's money in line. Our wedding was small, elegant, deeply personal. I still remember the way he looked at me as I walked down the aisle, like I was the answer to a question he never dared ask aloud. His best friend, Jason J., to everyone, stood beside him, beaming like he'd just handed over the keys to something sacred. Back then, I trusted Jay almost as much as I trusted Mark. He was kind, fiercely loyal, always the one to fix things when Mark and I had minor arguments. He never crossed lines, never lingered too long. He was just there. Reliable. Safe. Our first years of marriage were everything I had hoped for. Weekend brunches, quiet nights with wine and books, spontaneous road trips. Mark made me feel seen. He asked about my day. He remembered how I liked my coffee. He kissed my forehead every morning, without fail. When he got a promotion that required more travel, I was proud. Supportive. I believed in him. I didn't notice, not at first, the way his business trips grew longer, or how his phone became an extension of his hand. I told myself it was the stress, that the long hours were temporary. That success looked like this. Still, in those early years, I truly believed I was happy. I remember one moment vividly, our third anniversary. Mark surprised me with dinner on a rooftop overlooking the city skyline. Candles, music, the whole cliché. He gave me a bracelet engraved with the words, "Always, no matter what." I thought it was beautiful. Now, it feels like mockery. People used to tell me we looked like the kind of couple you'd see in a magazine spread, confident, in sync, slightly too good to be true. I used to smile at that. Because I believed it. I believed that a man like Mark, who knew all the lyrics to my favorite song and held my hand under the table during awkward family dinners, couldn't possibly have an ulterior motive. I believed in the weight of vows and the comfort of shared history. But belief is fragile. It only takes a whisper of truth to shatter it. And that whisper came in the form of a USB, tucked inside a plain envelope, sent by the one person who had stood beside Mark as he promised me forever. Looking back, it's astonishing how many things I explained away, how many red flags I painted white because I didn't want to believe what they meant. It started subtly. A missed call here, a late return from work there. Mark, who used to call every evening at 6:30 sharp, began calling at 7 o'clock, then 8:15, then not at all. When I asked, he said things were picking up. New clients, bigger accounts, more travel, and I wanted to believe him. So I did. He changed his cologne, said the old one gave him headaches, started going to the gym more often, even though he'd never cared about fitness before. I complimented him, told him he looked great, and he did. But something about the way he looked at himself in the mirror started to feel different. Not proud, secretive. His phone, once left casually on the coffee table or kitchen counter, now never left his side. He took it to the shower, slept with it under his pillow. When I laughed and asked if he'd joined the CIA, he smiled and said, "Just being careful. Clients are sensitive." I wanted to believe him. Then there were the emails. One night, I walked into the office while he was typing, and the screen flickered. He slammed the laptop shut. "Just financials," he said too fast. "Client information." His voice was tight, defensive, but I didn't press. I told myself I respected his privacy. I told myself marriage meant trust. We stopped having real conversations. Our talks became transactional: groceries, bills, dinner reservations. He stopped asking about my day, stopped noticing when I wore a new dress or stayed up late reading. I started to feel invisible in my own home, but instead of confronting it, I doubled down, tried harder, cooked his favorite meals, left sweet notes in his briefcase. He used to read them. He used to write back. I once found a receipt for a hotel in a nearby city. When I asked, he said his meeting ran late and he was too tired to drive home. I nodded, pretended that made sense, pretended I hadn't seen the room had been booked for 2. On our 5th anniversary, he forgot the date entirely, said he had a client dinner, brought me flowers the next day, lilies, even though I'm allergic. I smiled through swollen eyes and told him they were lovely. The loneliness crept in like fog, quiet, dense, hard to escape. I stopped talking to friends. I didn't want to explain the distance, didn't want their pity or their questions. I curated our life for social media. We looked happy. He played his part in photos. I clung to the illusion, because the alternative, that something was terribly wrong, was too terrifying to face. But even then, something in me had started to wake up. A whisper in the back of my mind I kept pushing away. It told me to look deeper. And then came the moment that whisper turned into a scream, the moment I opened that USB, saw that folder, and realized I hadn't imagined a thing. I didn't touch the USB again for 2 days. I kept it in my desk drawer, beneath a stack of old receipts and spare pens, as if burying it could postpone whatever was waiting inside. But it haunted me. I could feel it, even through the wood, like a living thing, pulsing with truths I wasn't ready for. When I finally opened the laptop again, I was alone in the house. I drew the curtains, locked the door, Saturday down with a cup of coffee that went cold in my hands. And then I clicked on the folder labeled Contingency. The subfolder I had opened first, You'll Never Know, had already given me more than I could bear, but I forced myself back into it, this time methodically. I started with accounts, spreadsheets, dozens of them, timestamps dating back 4 years, transfers, withdrawals, offshore names I'd never heard of. My name popped up again and again, attached to accounts I never opened, payments I never authorized. He was using me. Every transaction looked clean on the surface: consulting fees, reinvestments, holding companies. But when I opened the files deeper, I saw a pattern. He had created an entire financial shadow life under my legal identity. I was the scapegoat. If it ever unraveled, I would be the one buried in legal hell. I moved to the legal drafts folder next. Inside were PDF scans of contracts. My forged signature was on at least 6 of them. Shell companies registered with my maiden name. Loan applications with my employer's name falsified. I blinked back tears, nausea rising in my throat. How long had this been going on? Then came the messages. They were chat logs, exported into tidy, time-stamped files. At first, I didn't know who the recipient was, but the tone was intimate, familiar, too familiar. You know, I miss you more than I should. She's clueless as always. Just a few more months and the plan's done. Everything will be in place. She's better off not knowing. Trust me. I scrolled faster, trying to find a name, a clue, anything. Then one line stopped me cold. When I take Elena's name off the holding company, we'll finally be in the clear. My chest caved in. He was waiting until I had served my purpose. Then he would cut me out like I was an expired asset. I sat frozen, reading line after line of my own erasure being orchestrated in real time. He spoke about me like I was a tool, a shield, a temporary liability. My marriage, my love, was just a legal convenience. I moved to the video logs folder last. The files were labeled by date. One caught my eye immediately just 3 months ago. I clicked. The camera angle was shaky, clearly a hidden recording. Mark was in what looked like a hotel room. He sat across from a woman. Dark hair, navy dress, familiar, too familiar. They were drinking wine, laughing. Then I heard it. Her voice. She doesn't know you've been using her all this time? No, Mark said with a smirk. Elena still thinks I'm the man she married. Sweet, loyal, boring. She has no idea I'm even capable of this. He raised his glass. To freedom. They clinked. And I broke. I slammed the laptop shut. My breath caught somewhere between a scream and a sob. My hands were numb, my face hot. I had known, somewhere deep down, that something was wrong. But this wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. Premeditated. Cruel. Surgical. He had built a life on top of me, using my name, my trust, my love, and now he planned to walk away clean while I took the fall. But someone who knew had given me the chance to see it all before it was too late, and that someone had signed their name with a single letter. J. I opened the laptop again that night, hours after the sun had set and the house had gone still. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't moved much at all, except to pace between rage and despair. But there was one thing I still hadn't done, one truth I hadn't fully faced. I went back to the video logs, the one with Mark and the woman in the navy dress. I replayed it again, this time watching every frame. Her profile was soft, her smile delicate, measured. She held her wineglass with a practiced elegance, and her voice, low, confident, teasing, sent a chill down my spine again. There was something so familiar about it. The curve of her cheek, the cadence in her speech. I knew her. I knew I did. I paused the video and stared. Then it hit me like a wave crashing through my chest. Ava. The name formed in my mind before I could stop it. Ava. We had worked together years ago, in my first job out of college. She was in marketing. I was in compliance. We had lunch together twice a week. She came to our engagement party. She hugged me on my wedding day. And then, like so many acquaintances do, she drifted out of my life. Or so I thought. I scrolled through old photos on my phone. There she was in the background of a group shot, wearing a red dress and holding a champagne flute. Her hand was resting lightly on Mark's shoulder. Back then, I thought nothing of it. Just a guest being polite. But now, with new eyes, I saw the truth. She wasn't in the background. She never had been. I searched my inbox, then my text threads. Her name popped up once, years ago. Hey, I think I left my scarf at your place after the party. Mind if I swing by? I remembered now. I hadn't been home that day. Mark said he'd handled it. The nausea returned like a tidal wave. I bolted to the bathroom and threw up. Everything inside me, grief, disgust, shame, spilled out in a violent purge I couldn't control. She had been there from the beginning. Not just a stranger. Not just some woman he met later during his business trips. She was part of our story. She had smiled at me, toasted to our future, and walked through our door like a friend. And I had welcomed her. The betrayal wasn't just from him anymore. It had layers now, dimensions, a symphony of lies playing out behind every memory I once cherished. I kept thinking, how long had it gone on? Did it start before the wedding? During our engagement? Was Jason, the best man, the only one who didn't look away? I felt dirty, used, like my whole life had been a set piece, staged for the benefit of someone else's con. There was one final video I hadn't watched yet, dated just 2 weeks before the USB arrived. This one was different. It was footage from a phone, clearly recorded in secret. The audio was muffled, but I could still make it out. Mark and Ava were arguing in a parking garage. "You said you'd take care of it," she hissed. "She's catching on. You said she was dumb. You said she wouldn't notice." "I've got it handled. Relax. The files are encrypted." "Then why is Jason acting weird? He keeps asking questions." Jason? So he had known. At least part of it. And that's when the camera shifted slightly. The person holding the phone, whoever was recording, moved closer. The video ended abruptly after that. But the implication was clear. Jason had been watching them, listening, gathering proof, and when he had enough, he gave it to me. The man I thought of as a quiet witness, an accessory to my husband's polished perfection, had been the only one fighting for me behind the scenes. And Ava, the woman who toasted my love, had been pouring poison into it from the start. The morning after I discovered Ava's face, after the bathroom floor and the shaking hands and the empty stare at the ceiling, I woke up different. There was no grand epiphany, no dramatic vow for vengeance, just a single, clear thought. I was done being anyone's liability. I didn't cry that morning. I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch when Mark kissed my cheek on his way out the door, murmuring something about a client lunch. I watched him walk away like a stranger, and I got to work. First, I copied everything from the USB to 2 external hard drives. One went into my bank's safety deposit box, the other into the hands of a lawyer I found through a quiet recommendation in a private online forum for financial abuse victims. I told her everything. I brought documents, signed contracts I never touched, offshore accounts, shell companies, fabricated emails. I even showed her the videos. She watched in silence. When it ended, she looked at me and said, "You're sitting on a grenade. But the good news? You're not the one holding the pin." That was the first time I almost smiled in days. Next, I opened my own accounts, real ones, in my name, protected by security layers Mark didn't know existed. I transferred small amounts from our joint savings, just enough to avoid suspicion, but enough to start over if I had to. I visited our home office when Mark was away, opening drawers I hadn't touched in months. He was careless, cocky, really. I found copies of incorporation papers, client lists, and handwritten notes with Ava's initials scribbled in the margins. I scanned them all. I called my firm's legal department, asking subtle questions about identity fraud, asset manipulation, spousal liability. I framed it like a what-if for a friend. But I saw the way the associate's eyes narrowed as I asked the right questions. He knew. I knew. But neither of us said it aloud. Then I changed every password I had. Email, banking, insurance, cloud storage. I activated 2-factor authentication across the board. I removed Mark's access to my medical records and digital signature registry, quietly, without a trace. He didn't notice. Not yet. I scheduled a meeting with a forensic accountant. I moved personal files off my laptop, replacing them with dummy folders and decoy spreadsheets that looked just real enough to distract him if he ever snooped. Every move I made was surgical, calculated. I became someone else. Not the Elena he married. Not the woman who decorated our anniversary scrapbook with pressed petals and ticket stubs. Not the one who baked his favorite bread on Sundays or left notes in his suitcase before work trips. That version of me had died somewhere between the first spreadsheet and Ava's laugh echoing on tape. In her place stood someone sharper, someone quieter, a woman who watched, documented, and planned. I began sleeping in separate cycles, awake late into the night, reviewing files, writing timelines, cross-referencing transfers. I traced the money like veins in a body I never knew was sick. And the more I saw, the more I realized how much rot lived beneath the surface. One night, as Mark slept soundly beside me, I stared at the back of his neck and wondered how many other lies he'd built into the foundation of our life. He didn't stir. He had no idea that the woman lying next to him had already started to dismantle him piece by piece. He still kissed me in the mornings, still brought home dinner when he remembered, still played the role. But I had stopped. I was done pretending. I was no longer the supporting character in his twisted narrative. I was rewriting the story. And when the time came to turn the page, he wouldn't even recognize the woman standing in front of him. The morning sun was just beginning to cast its pale light through the windows. Yet inside me, a storm raged that no amount of daylight could calm. It was the day I decided that enough was enough, the day I walked away from everything I thought was mine. Packing my bags was a ritual of silent finality. Every fold of clothing, every carefully chosen item was a step further from the life I had built, or rather, the illusion I had been living. I moved with purpose, as if each object I placed into my suitcase was a piece of myself I was reclaiming. Photos from happier times stared back at me from the walls, wedding portraits frozen in smiles that now felt like lies. I took a deep breath, letting the sharp sting of betrayal wash over me. But I didn't break. Not this time. On the kitchen counter, I left a letter. No accusations, no pleas, just truth. I wrote of the pain, the deceit, and the resolve I had found within myself. I told him that I was choosing me now, for the first time in years. I didn't look back when I closed the door behind me. The sound echoed through the empty house like a final goodbye, both an ending and a beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel. Alone, yes, but free. I had spent years molding myself to fit the roles he demanded: wife, partner, caretaker. But today, I shed those skins. I became someone new, someone strong, resilient, and unyielding. The house grew smaller behind me with every step I took, and the weight on my chest began to lift. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this much. I was no longer willing to be a prisoner of lies. For the first time in a long time, I felt the stirrings of hope. About a week after I left, Mark showed up at my mother's house unannounced. His eyes were wild, equal parts desperation and disbelief. He came armed with excuses and apologies, attempting to rewrite the story he had once helped script with lies and betrayal. I was under a lot of pressure, he said, voice trembling. You have to understand. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he pleaded, falling to his knees at one point, begging for forgiveness like a man drowning in his own guilt. But I wasn't the woman who would be swayed by empty words anymore. I listened coldly as he spun tales of stress, misunderstandings, and mistakes. He tried to paint himself as a victim, claiming that his decisions were made out of love and desperation, not malice. I looked at him, really looked. The man who once held my hand, who whispered promises of forever, was now a stranger scrambling to save what little dignity he had left. When he accused me of betrayal, I laughed bitterly and hollowly. Betrayal? I said. You built a life on mine, stole my identity, and hid a woman in my place. That's betrayal. He stumbled backward, realizing his words had no power over me. The truth was a blade sharper than any apology. I stood firm. The cold resolve that had been growing inside me over the last weeks now burned bright and fierce. No more rewriting, I said. This story ends here. He left that day broken, defeated, and I knew, with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, that I was free. The courtroom was stark and cold, a place where truths are stripped bare beneath the harsh glare of unforgiving lights. I sat there, heart steady but pounding beneath my ribs, as the endless parade of evidence was laid out for everyone to see. The files I'd saved, the videos I'd endured, the forged signatures, and the twisted web Mark had spun, all laid out like bones picked clean. Mark sat across from me, no longer the man I thought I knew. His confidence was shattered, replaced by a quiet desperation that came too late. I saw him struggle to find words, to explain the unexplainable, but the judge's eyes bored down like 1,000 silent accusations. The verdict came with the weight of finality. Mark was held accountable for the fraud, the deceit, and the damage he caused. It wasn't the fairy tale ending I'd once dreamed of, but it was justice. Closure, I learned, isn't always quiet. It isn't always peaceful or neat. Sometimes it's loud in its absoluteness, in the breaking of old illusions, and in the cold reckoning of what was lost. As I left the courtroom, a strange calm settled over me. The past was behind me. The future, uncertain but mine, stretched out ahead. Sometimes, karma is a slow, quiet force, but in the end, it arrives. Since the trial, life has settled into an unfamiliar rhythm, quieter, slower, but undeniably mine. There are no more secrets lurking in shadowed corners, no whispered lies to untangle. For the first time in years, I wake up to a future that belongs solely to me. I've rebuilt my world on my own terms. The new apartment, bathed in sunlight, is filled with the small things I once overlooked: bookshelves heavy with stories, plants thriving by the windowsill, and the comforting hum of solitude. I've reconnected with old friends, started to dream again, and found strength in the silence. I'm learning to trust myself once more, to listen to the woman I nearly lost. The scars remain reminders of pain and betrayal, but they are also marks of survival and resilience. This is no fairy tale. There's no magical healing or instant redemption. But it is a story of reclamation, of choosing myself when others chose to betray me. And finally, my future plan includes me.